Good evening. Welcome to the actually fourth episode of Dance Connector Musings. And I have a very, very unusual guest today. Yes. I just recently got acquainted with Lucas Spivey, and it was during this webinar at the Rush Bartle Foundation. It was about a month ago, if I'm not mistaken. And I was listening. It was very interesting ideas about cultural coupling, about teaching artists how to be entrepreneurs. And it's very important. From working with a lot of artists, I know how many of them are actually very far away from being entrepreneurs or understanding how to run business. So it's a very, very good and important thing is that you're doing, Lucas. But I actually got, first of all, I got fascinated and really, about your life story. About your life story. And no, I'm actually, you are my second guest in May, actually second guest on the podcast at all, because I started with just started talking about myself, and then I decided to start inviting people, and you're my second guest, and you're the second guest this month that it's really possible to make a movie based on your life.
It really would be. I say that as the director of said film, as well as possibly the editor and director of photography and all that. Yeah, I feel that way about my life. I would love to get into that a little bit more because biography is a really interesting topic for a creative person.
Sure. So let's start with this, and I'm actually going to talk to some of my friends who are involved in the movie business and see if they would be interested.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think it was a couple years ago. Sorry, there's a little boy dressed as a shark outside my office door. A couple of years ago, I was approached by a documentary studio. They wanted to follow me on my road trips. I should probably introduce myself before I go too much further into the story, but
Sure.
Suffice to say, I had a documentary studio approach me about that. And at the time, I knew I had an interesting life. That wasn't what was the question. The question was whether I wanted to be watched by other people. Hold on just a second.
Sure.
I figured better to nip it in the bud. So yes, I have been approached by a film studio, and I think that it's important to tell your story authentically. And I think that when you involve another entity like a film studio, it's a collaboration, and you're not going to be able to control the narrative, which is kind of beautiful. The way that other people interpret your story is very valid. And it was an interesting experience. We did not move forward with the documentary. There was, in my opinion, they wanted me to be the director of it, and I said no to that, and that's why we didn't move forward with it. I'm not a film director. I'm living
you're
my
many
life.
different, you're many different things, but you're not a film director.
Exactly. So that's why I didn't move forward with it. But we should tell folks who I am. That's a great way to start an interview, so that people know who I am. My name is Lucas Spivey. I'm the founder of Culture Hustlers. I'm also the founder of Mobile Incubator, which is what you see behind me, which is this mobile recording studio, a fleet of them. I have 3 of them now that I take around the United States, and I've been to all 50 states, and I've recorded interviews with thousands of people at this point. And it's always about art and entrepreneurship. What is it like to make a go of it as a writer, artist, designer, performer? And always fascinating stories about people who have to walk the line between a starving artist and a sellout. And that is what I do today. And I create educational content such as podcasts, documentaries, photo essays, books, lesson plans, all under the topic of, how you make a living while making art. And that's what I do today. But I do have a history that led me to that, right? Every artist has a past and a story that can inspire millions. And when we meet up with creative people, we are not able to separate their creation from who they are. And I think that's really important. It's why we're so interested in who Elon Musk is, right? Who is Elon Musk, or who is Tesla, right? Who is Michael Jordan? Who is Beyonce? Who are these people? It's a very important question. And it's an important thing to keep in mind that it's our way of clinging to humanity in a very capitalist time, right? Where we think that we can separate what we produce from the producer. And the truth is, humans really aren't interested in that. We're really interested in knowing who the person is behind whatever you see. The building that you made, who made those buildings, right? Who built those bricks? Who wired the building? There's a story there. And it makes the things that are around us very meaningful and purposeful. So I'm not sure what you have in mind for this interview, if you want to dive into my story, or you have some other agenda that you wanted to talk about.
Basically, what I meant when I was talking about making a movie about your life, I was talking about not just making a documentary about your meetings with story with this artist, but also a story about your own life, the way you overcome actually terrible childhood and huge problems. Again, people can read about this on your website. I don't want to get into a lot of details, but it makes a fascinating movie. It would make a fascinating movie, coming from abusive childhood to being a wandering teacher and pollinator.
I think that's important. I mean, let's couch my story in a bigger question for your audience, which is, how do we tell our story about our past to ourselves, right? Like, how do we relate the things that we went through to ourselves? And then also, when asked and when in front of an audience, how do we relate that story to other people? And for me, I found that to be very important. The work that I do, I'm able to be helpful regardless of my past, right? I'm able to teach entrepreneurship to artists regardless of what I went through. But I think it's very interesting to know why I do the things that I do. And for me, I went through a terrible childhood. I moved every year of my life because I had 3 stepfathers and 4 stepmothers. We were as poor as you can get in America. And I had an abusive stepfather. I had a drug addict for a father who's in and out of prison my whole life, who just went back into prison last year. And my mother was 17 years old when she had me. And I have an older sister. So this single mother of 2 kids as a teenager dropped out of high school and had to navigate life with these 2 kids and a father who is a dealer and a stealer. And despite all those things that were stacked up against me, I managed to live the life that I really wanted to live. I think it's important to note that we are not our life is not determined by our past, but it definitely influences it and gives it a lot of texture. Right. So I want to make this clear that you don't have to have a troublesome past in order to be, an interesting person. That's not true at all. Yes. I want to make that clear.
But even though it makes for an interesting movie.
Sure. Everyone has an interesting story. This is my interesting story, and what is interesting about my story is overcoming hardship, but that's not the only kind of interesting story. Everyone has a past and a story that can inspire millions. Right. Everyone. And
I actually, I'm sorry, I do have a question. One thing that, again, when I read about your biography, you mentioned a teacher who was pivotal in changing your story, in changing and making. And I, as a former teacher myself, I graduated from the college back in Ukraine, and I taught actually in night school for kids similar to you, to what you described your young, how you've been in the young during your young years. So I kind of picture really well how these kids are in the class, and I understand, but I'm really interested about what can you tell about this teacher, what he or she said to use it, help you to change.
Yeah. The the really pivotal things in my life that helped me escape the gravity of the tumultuous, chaotic childhood that I had were all revolved around teachers and schools and education. It really was my way of escaping that gravity of the situation that I grew up in. And there were several experiences. The first one that I think you're mentioning is, I had a very, so basically I'd come home every day and get the shit kicked out of me by my stepdad. It was a very violent situation, and I would have a lot of bruises that I would lie about or cuts that I would lie about. But one day I went to the school and my whole face was completely swollen. He had picked me up by my throat and slammed me against the wall so hard that I shit my pants. And then he held me there and slapped me back and forth over and over and over again. And then he kicked me out of the house to go walk to school in the middle of a Wisconsin winter. And by the time I got to school, the teacher noticed that this kid was always showing up every couple of days with some new bruises or cuts. And he was always lying about, where they happened and what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the teacher is someone who sees you every day. The teacher is someone who, like your family, witnesses you on a daily, at least 5 days a week, typically, basis, and can notice the changes. And this particular day, she knew that, there's no way I fell down the stairs and, shit my pants and had a swollen face and was crying and cold and walking to school without a jacket. No more lying, right? This teacher had seen me throughout time and could identify that there was something below the surface of what I was saying. There was more to be said. And so she took me into the nurse's office, and the teacher and the nurse, they tried to get that real story out of me, and I wouldn't tell them. And then they brought the principal in, and the principal was like, "You must tell us what's going on." And I wouldn't tell the principal. But finally, they got me to tell them the story, and they called my mother, and of course, my mother had kind of known about it, but had been looking the other way, and kind of didn't want to believe the tragic truth of it. But there it was in front of her, and it took teachers, to pull that out of me. So that was the first experience having education really make a difference in my life. And we could say it was an individual, but really I think the education system is set up to have these one-on-one reoccurring touching base kind of relationships, so that you can notice when something is up and kind of read between the lines on that. And that is really what inspired me to do Culture Hustlers. Is I saw that there's tons of great art schools and art colleges, but nobody was doing this one-on-one mentorship, like checking in on these artists routinely and making sure that all their needs were met and asking them really hard questions, like just to check in
That's
between
what
the
it is.
lines, because
Okay.
artists often tell people what they want to hear, and that is not going to get them the growth that they're looking for. So those experiences from my childhood really made me a teacher and made me the kind of teacher that I am.
Interesting. So basically, you are your teaching is one-on-one. You talk to people, you talk to artists, you try to understand their story, you try to understand where they're coming from, and you try to show them where do they need to go in order to be successful.
Yeah, and the statement that I have, the message that I have for the world is that there is no path for you at all. If you want to be a creative person, get used to there being no path. And a lot of people come to me, come to Culture Masters, or come to any mentor in their life, and they say, how do I do this, right? Like, how do I be a musician or an artist or a poet or a fashion designer or a filmmaker or a dancer or whatever it is? They say, how do I do it? Tell me the way, show me the path. And the hard news that they don't want to hear is there's no path, none, there's not a step of it already made for you, none of it. And you got to swallow that truth completely in order to start making your own path. Because otherwise you'll always start looking for the easier, softer way. You know, you'll start following other people's paths, and then you're an imitator, you're derivative, you're always trying to catch up with the person who already went down that path.
Yeah.
You start to get competitive instead of creative. You know, a creative person says, I want to get to the top of that mountain and it's never been climbed before. So I need to stop looking for someone else to tell me what the path is. And I need to sit down and figure out my path to get up there.
Okay, okay. Makes complete sense. Makes complete sense to me. So I would like to move to the next question. Your mobile incubator. I understand you refurbished old old truck.
Mm-hmm.
You built it inside and out, and you created a podcast, like a podcast studio, interview space. And when I read a description of your place, one thing is that kind of caught again my attention: mosaic. You have a lot of mosaic elements. Why mosaic?
Because at the time I was managing a mosaic studio in Tieton, Washington, called Tieton Mosaic. And it was a National Endowment for the Arts funded project that I was completing. I also wrote another grant for the National Endowment for the Arts to continue that project. It was a very big project. It took up a lot of my time. And I learned how to make mosaics while I was up there. And I had this idea, which was, well, tile and glass tile and ceramic tile is not my medium. I understand that it's beautiful, but it's not where my talent lies. And I've always been a woodworker. So I thought, could I make a wood mosaic? So I just started playing around, gluing pieces of wood together. And I made a bedroom set where the headboard and the tops of the nightstands and the credenza were all this like mosaic wood. And then I'd always wanted a camper trailer. So I thought, well, what if I had a camper trailer? Could I make a mosaic inside it? And I thought, you know, I could do the walls, but if I got one that had this round shape, like the one behind me here, I could actually make an arch where you're stacking the wood over and over and over again on top of each other until you reach the top, the keystone. And actually that, you know, from my art history classes, I understood that the keystone and that weight distribution over the arch would actually create a pretty strong surface. So I took, over 1,000 pieces of 3/4 inch wood, very thick wood, and glued them together and nailed them, and then went over the whole thing with wood putty, and then sanded that down, and then put a milky stain over it, and then sanded that down, and then polyurethaned it, and then sanded that down and polyed it again, and poly and sand, and poly and sand, and then I waxed it, and now it has this just exquisite glow when you come in there. And there's also a table in there that was made by, designed by Kate Jessup, who's a mosaic artist, and then laser cut in the studio. And then I put that together. There's also a mosaic sign, digitally cut paper sign that I designed that went up there. But that's just one of the recording studios I have. I have 3 of them now.
Okay, yeah. The reason I've asked about this because you know, even though I'm no artist, you know, I can't do this, but I love to play this mosaics since I was a kid, and all my business, adult life, I was compiling my projects from different pieces of mosaic. I always had mosaic as a model, as a metaphor for my
Yeah,
work.
I think mosaic's an important metaphor, and
Hmm.
creativity happens everywhere. Um, I think it's less important to make art, because art can be anything. But I think it's really important to think, how can I approach everything in my life with a creative mindset? I think that's really what makes a good life, in my opinion, or at
Hmm.
least what makes my life good, is that I've found I've found that creativity really unlocks my best and brings out
Hmm.
the best in my relationships. Um, and when we talk about mosaics, well, I mean, for me, I'd like to travel to every country in the world and talk to an artist. And what that provides for me is this really incredible mosaic, so that when I look at the world, I see these places and I think of these people and the colorful stories that they have.
Hmm.
And so I think that's like a very additive, creative way of looking at
Right,
things, the mosaic
right.
metaphor.
Yeah, that like back in 2000s, me and several other people, we ran a festival, art festival, it calls Mosaic. And actually it was, we had a little bit of trouble when we were copyrighted this word, because it was mosaica, not mosaic. It was because of Russian language that we all speak. In Russian, mosaic, it's how it sounds. And we combined pieces of different cultures, of people coming from former Soviet Union who represented completely different cultures. And it became a really powerful symbol for me. Uh, another thing you kind of struck me as similarity when we were talking of first time on the phone. You talked about yourself as a pollinator.
Hmm.
Okay, so can you expand a little bit on this?
Yeah. Pollination and education are kind of synonymous for me. Um, I'm not smart, I'm not an expert, but I am really good at picking up wisdom and just kind of carrying it in my body, and then bumping into someone and then realizing that they need this piece of wisdom, and I shake it off onto them. But as far as creation of wisdom, I I don't think I'm that good at it, but I think I'm pretty good at identifying when someone else has a piece of wisdom, and I just kind of grab it. And if you notice, like I have tattoos all over
Mhm.
my body. These are all lessons that I've learned. They're pieces of wisdom that I've picked up and I've put onto my body, so that whenever I'm in a situation with someone else, I can pass that on to them. I can pollinate that wisdom to them. But
Mhm.
I didn't invent any of these things.
Okay.
None of them are aphorisms or proverbs that I came up with. They're things that I heard, and it just rang true to me, and so I collected it.
Mhm.
And all the stories that I've recorded with folks, I am kind of able to memorize their narrative very easily, and
Mhm.
memorize lessons from them very easily, and pass that on very easily. And
Okay.
role in the world, and I think that
Mhm.
that is my role. I distrust experts implicitly. I have a huge authority complex. I don't like cops. I don't like religious leaders. I don't like government. I don't like experts. I don't like teachers often. I don't like people in leadership positions of authority. However, um, though I have this distrust of teachers, people who they have the knowledge and they're going to give someone the knowledge because they're the experts. Although I have a distrust in that, I don't have a distrust in this role of the wandering story collector. That to me it's not about authority or expertise at all. I think it's like a little bumblebee that goes around to a flower that the bumblebee finds interesting, And while they're there, just, collecting nectar or whatever they do, there's these, pollens of wisdom that just hold on to the body, and then it transfers that to another flower that needs it. And so it's not about, there's no self-interest there, I think, for the bumblebee when it pollinates. It's really just, it's after its own self-interest, and it just which is nectar or whatever. And just through happenstance, it's benefiting the other people around it, the other flowers around it in this case. So that's why I like the metaphor of the pollinator for myself, and that's how I
Okay.
feel about myself as a teacher.
Okay. Okay. But at the same time, if I understood you correctly, following your story and repeating about you, you kind of came to the specific kind of to the specific, I would say, period of your career, of your life, when you can't be just one-on-one. It's not enough. So you collected this wisdom that you picked up, maybe looking at your hands and reading those, and you collected them in your books. The book is kind of, it's one-to-many relationship. It's not one-to-one, one-on-one. So
Yeah.
how you came to this?
Um, when I was initially traveling around in the camper trailer behind me, I went on a 3-month road trip, and I went to like 32 states, and I think it was like 13,000 miles or something like that. And I was exhausted, but I collected a lot of that one-on-one that I wanted. But I think after that road trip, I realized, well, I definitely can't recommend this to everyone because it was an ordeal, even for someone who loves travel.
Hey,
So
people made a movie about this and got Oscar, right? Nominates.
what's that?
The movies that received Oscar this year was exactly about people like you, nomads.
Yeah, I think I started watching that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I would love it if everyone could do it, but I don't think everyone can, and I don't think everyone needs to. I
Yeah.
think it makes sense for me, but uh, I learned a lot, and I wanted to give other people the experience that I had. But I know that not everyone can do that. I think it really is actually a privilege to be able to travel. It's not as beautiful as it looks on Instagram. This is a beautiful photo behind me, but I promise you, it was like not easy to get to this place
I
behind
can
me.
imagine.
And so I thought, well, how can I give people a taste of the experience that I had? And I wish they could meet the amazing people that I met on my travels, but that's not realistic for all of them to do so. And that really is where media comes into place. So people had asked me, why don't you make a podcast? Why don't you write a series of essays or blogs? Why don't you make some videos? Why don't you post some photos? Why don't, and I thought, okay, I'll try all those things. So I tried all those
Why
things.
not?
I can tell you that I don't want a podcast anymore. I don't want I don't want to direct, I don't want to produce those things anymore. I don't want to produce a video series anymore. I just want to talk to people. And I think that social media has come a long way since then. So now what I like doing is just getting on Instagram and just interviewing people live, which I think is really fun. But I think that there is no replacement for the experience of being in the physical. I think we're learning that as we come out of the pandemic. You and I are blessed to be able to be in contact with each other, Mikhail, through Zoom right now. But there are people down the road from us right now who we could go talk to in person, and there's no replacement for that. There never will be. We can go forward 5,000 years with VR and augmented reality. It doesn't compare to the physical. We are physical human beings. So I try to do my best with digital media to have other people have access to the stories, But I do make it clear as often as I can that you need to get out and meet people. You need to go experience life in the presence of other human beings. Don't just stay at home with your phone in your hand. And if you do go on the road, don't just stay in the hotel. Don't just stay in your RV. Get out and experience this planet full of incredible people.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I spent 14 years of my life traveling all the time. So now as I try to travel as much as I can, and I value a lot communicating, talking with these people in real time, in real space, because you can observe body language, you can look at their eyes, you can experience touch, and you can understand much better what they are about, and even with the best quality Zoom chat. And I would like, actually, original idea for our conversation appeared to me when I was listening to your presentation at Rock Bartle. When you tell that artists will be the people, will be the ones who help move the society beyond the capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So can you expand on this, please?
Sure. We're not, this world is menacing, as my friend Brian would say. And this planet that we live on is an illusion of what we're really supposed to be doing. Look, business is not important. And guess what? Art isn't important either. Life is important. People are important. Art and business are really just things we can do while we're here. But I think that right now we are witnessing what it's like in America in particular. I can't speak for the rest of the planet, but I can say in America, there is a toxicity to our consumerism. I think everyone knows it, but I don't think it's always talked about in a way that really exposes just how deep it runs. Consumerism is, in my opinion, contrary to our species. Like, I actually think that it's inherently violent to our species. We are some of the most creative species that has ever existed. You're not the only creative species, but we are almost defined, in scientific lingo as creative minds. Consumerism is not the same as creativity. And the idea that we could get pleasure from consuming it is very shallow. It really only scratches the surface of what joy we could have. And it also eliminates the grace in our lives, which is that we're surrounded by a creation that we could never do. We can't make a Grand Canyon, we can't make a tree, we can't even make a blade of grass, we can't make a drop of rain. Like, we didn't create those elements, they're just around us. So I feel like capitalism and business has really distracted us from the deepest joys that we could be having, which is our innate ability to create, and also the experience of the creation around us. And I understand that the products and services that we experience are created. I get that. But a lot of them are wagging the dog as far as what life is about. That a lot of products and services have no basis or need at them at all. And, with, like, do we need hats? I guess so. Do I need a van? Not really. Do I need a phone? No. Do I need food? Yes, but you don't really need that much. And I think that a lot of times living in a capitalist world, we're distracted by thinking that we need things that we really don't need.
I'm not sure about van and the phone, because if you wouldn't have a van, you wouldn't be able to travel all these 32 states and meet all the people.
I would just be walking around. And do I need shoes to walk around? No. You really don't need what you think you need. And I think a lot of living in capitalist America is constantly being told that you need things that you don't really need. Um, and and then once we get them, well, we need another thing, and we don't really need much at all. The rain falls, the sun rises and sets, you know, the seasons come and go. The birds chirp, they lay eggs, like the life goes on whether we buy that new toy or not.
Okay, so where are artists in this picture?
Where artists and all this, I would hope that some artists, and I don't think all artists are called to do this, but I would hope that some artists can help us understand and appreciate the grace that is out there in the world, that you don't need to do anything, you just need to be. I think there's a lot of poets that do that. I think there's a lot of visual artists that do that. There's definitely a lot of writers that do that. There's performers who can relay that to us. Even those people who prepare our food and who design our garments can help us return to this idea that we're already enough before we get started. And to bring this back to business, so when we teach the topic of time to our students, we talk about how you are enough before you begin. And I think that's like antithetical to what a lot of us feel, is that we need to go get that degree. We need to go record that podcast. We need to go renovate that van. We need to go build that website, and then we'll be enough. And it's actually inverse. We are enough, and we do these things as an expression of being enough. So our art is an expression of that there's only solutions, there's not problems. And I think in a capitalist world, they're always teaching you like problems. There's problems. We got to solve problems. You need to solve the problems in your life. We have problems. Ugh, I think that sometimes art can be about problem solving, but I also think that we need artists to step up and say, no, we need to express how we are problemless sometimes, and that we are a solution, like before we even begin. I think art can do that, but I don't know if a truck can do that. I don't know if a new type of Bud Light can do that, or a higher resolution TV screen can do that. I think it's up to the artists to do that. We need poetry to convey that feeling. And so I think art is deeply needed today. Again, I'm only speaking for America right now. I'm not really well traveled around the world, but I feel it everywhere I go in America. This overarching narrative that you're not enough. And I think some artists can step up and create and relate that we are enough before we begin.
Okay, on this positive note, I would like to thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. It gave me a lot of food for thought, and I believe to people who will be watching and listening to this will be, again, enough, a lot of things to ponder and think about. And I really see when you spend so much time traveling around and talking to different people, you develop a philosophical mind. It's yeah, a lot of things that I already heard, and the things that our artists are conductors between universe and the humanity.
Well,
So,
and I hope my travels take me to Philadelphia, and that I get to meet you in person.
absolutely, we are about to get a contract with our former venue that is close to opening. So we hope to host a series. We are also about to open our own incubator. It calls
Nice.
Magical Arts Nest, and the opening is gonna be on Memorial Day weekend.
Nice.
So
Congratulations.
thank you. We're gonna not broadcast, but we're gonna record this event first to make sure that everything goes as planned. But meantime, again, thank you, Lucas, for this great conversation. I stop recording.
Bye, everybody.